Well, hop on your dragons and fly away from the darkness. It's time for 2-on-1, the internet's only remaining podcast that hasn't been devoured by an overly cheap metaphor. Hi, I'm one of your co-hosts, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm your other co-host, the Reverend Stephanie Candle. I can't say my name anymore because I'm just so
well, maybe that's your true name that you need to shout into the dark.
I do, and just hold it like a grain of sand to start again.
Friends, we're talking about the Neverending Story today, which honestly, it's only 90 minutes long, but it really does feel like it is never ending in a lot of ways. And if you're not watching the video, you don't see that Spiff in her love of costumery is dressed as the child empress, but is identifying herself as simply the empress, and that's way less creepy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, because I was like, I can't do child empress because I just can't. But I am, for those of you that are not, I didn't have like a flowy white top because that's just not me, but I did have an abundance of pearls that I like, you can't really see, but they're like intricately woven into my hair, and they're like my grandmother's pearls, so I'm being very careful with that.
I don't think y'all understand like the depth of commitment to a bit that Spiff will really. I ask you to reference our Schitt's Creek episodes where I simply taped eyebrows onto the top of my glasses to be Eugene Levy, and Spiff went full Moira Rose as the bird doctor.
Yeah, from Crows Have Eyes 3. I also like watched the Empress's like makeup because she has like very heavy dark eyes, but like the rest is like very white. So it was just like foundation and eyes. So, you know, I love you know, Arthur, something about me that I think you may already know is that I love a good costume. I love good apparel that helps me feel the part.
Well, you have a commitment to quality and detail. You're not going to do things halfway. And hey, doesn't that inform also why you have stoles and liturgical textiles from Jeff Wunrow Designs?
It surely does. It truly does, actually, because I mean, I love pretty things. I love things that help me feel the part. I am a 3, as we all know. I've got this imposter syndrome that really like runs deep. And so sometimes I just need to put on a stole to remind myself that like I am tied to this together with other people. I am like, it helps me like the weight of it like really does center me in the work that I am called to do, when often I am looking elsewhere because I do a lot of different things. And so when I need to be focused for the work of congregational ministry, particularly, or justice ministries in the street, because I wear my Jeff Wunrow justice stole all the time. I love my Jeff Wunrow stoles, and every single week as we record this, I look at the entire wall of stoles that I have, and there are many. And they are not all from Jeff Wunrow, because some people give me other stoles, but every stole that I have ever purchased has been from Jeff Wunrow.
Well, you know, make mine a Wunrow is something.
Ooh, that's good.
We should start coining that phrase in there, because yes, there's an intentionality from start to finish, from design to creation, even to shipping and handling. The people at Jeff Wunrow Designs make things work, and they make things work for you. You can check out the full catalog of stoles, of paraments, of banners, of altar accessories, of face masks at Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNROW.com. There's also customization options available. You can see all of that, but after our show today, because though the story is never ending, this episode is, and I am sure it is jam-packed. So
and we want to just make sure, as you all know, but you know, it is our duty to remind you, when you were at Jeff Wunrow and you were putting all those stoles in your in your cart, you need to utilize our code 2on115 to spell it out, 2on1, and it's right here below if you were watching, and online or those that are listening, 2on1, spell that out, 1515, don't spell that out. Those are numbers. So 2on1 letters, 15 numbers. I never remember the difference between numbers and letters when I'm talking about it. I very much know what they are. But 2on115 gets you 15% off your entire stole order.
That's going to be one of our coffee cups. Numbers and letters. Spiff does know them.
It does.
I want to welcome my good friend, and your good friend too. You just don't know it yet. Dr. Donnie Featherston. Hey, Donnie, welcome to 2on1.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. Glad you're here.
Yeah. Very excited that you are here. Thank you for coming on the show. It's nice to meet you. Yeah. Arthur, you and Donnie know each other much better than Donnie and I, although Donnie and I are quickly becoming best friends. Best friends. But Donnie, why don't you introduce yourself to our deuces? Who are you? What do you do? What do you think? And then tell us a little bit about why Neverending Story.
Okay, so my name is Dr. Donnie Featherston. I am currently serving in an administrative role at a community college in Wichita. But before that, I taught philosophy and religion and some other classes too. I don't know what else to say about myself besides that. So I don't know. I don't like talking about myself like that. The Neverending Story. Let me. I'm not going to give the typical answer of the Neverending Story because I've given this actually a lot of thought of why that movie resonates with me so much, and it's very little things. It's the memories. So I was trying to think about the memories I had of as a child of the Neverending Story, and they're very particular memories. The way he broke the glass to get the key to go to that room to read the book. The way when it's that weird couple that before he runs through the where the laser beams come out of the naked statues, right? The way the sort of smoke sifted over the cup. The way the rock biter or rock eater ate rocks. There's very little particular things about that movie that really form a deep part of my I guess technically my pre-conscious brain as a child in really strange informative ways, and almost have this kind of ASMR reaction to me from that film. So the other one is when he comes out of the trash when the bullies are chasing him before Falkor rescues him. The way the trash sits on him was always fascinating to me because it doesn't look like trash. It looks like very clean shredded paper, and that always just struck me as I don't know. So there's little things about that film that really have forever lodged themselves in my brain. So yeah. Kind of. That's not a good answer.
No, it's a great answer.
It's the honest answer.
So the Neverending Story is in the zeitgeist, right? It's a if you talk about the 80s and you talk about children's cinema, Neverending Story is there. I really don't like this movie. It always freaked me out. It freaked me out when I was a kid, and I watched it as an adult and thought, well, this is hot garbage. And it's my argument. So Mystery Science Theater 3000, Spiff, is a show that really became popular on Comedy Central, but it was a guy and some robots, which are actually just puppets, and people making smartass comments riffing on old, really easy to license movies that were poorly made. And you see bad special effects and bad writing. And of course, they didn't help anything by editing it to be within the 2 hours of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And it keeps getting revived, which I'm happy about. The Neverending Story is the line, I'm going to call it the Mystery Science Theater 3000 line of, if it were any worse, it would need to be panned on Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's just right up there. It is the border. It is the four corners of bad cinema. And it's okay to disagree with me about that.
Yeah, I do. I strongly do.
Story.
So I remember watching this movie. So I'm an 80s kid. And I remember watching this movie as a young person, 5, 6-ish, maybe 7, and really loving it. I knew the minute Falkor came on the screen, I knew his name was Falkor. I knew there were things that came out of me having not watched this movie in 30 something years, that I was like, oh, this is a part of my childhood that I know. But watching it again for the first time since then, I was like, what on God's green earth is happening here?
Yeah, you literally were texting me, what is this?
What is this? Well, because 2 weeks in a row now, I've watched things that I, for all intents and purposes, hadn't ever seen. Footloose, I also hadn't seen, but I almost live tweeted this. We're gonna do
the WTF to 80s movies. We got to have a subgenre of 2-on-1 episodes where we're like, oh my God, the Goonies is actually kind of racist or whatever.
Not even kind of.
That one, The Wizard, where he gets the Power Glove and the Nintendo tournament.
Yes.
That's pretty.
But this movie particularly, it was one of those things where, I took several screenshots and sent them to Arthur as I was watching, because I was like, this is mildly pornographic, which I have no problem with, but it's a children's movie.
It's clearly a
Those-
vagina.
Those naked statues are like very graphic.
Yes.
I
Very
think
well,
there's
and
nipples.
the turtle
There's
head
nipples.
and there are nipples, but women have nipples. That's all right. And
Yeah, everybody does.
yeah, I mean, it's true. Everyone does. Most everyone does. I don't know.
But I guess so.
But like the what is the palace is definitely like a vagina. There's all sorts of things, and I was like, and I don't care. And also, it's a story of a young boy, like, and I was like, there's a lot happening here. So, what is? When was the last time you all watched it? Did you watch it in preparation for this? And like,
No.
how has your understanding of this movie changed throughout the years?
So I think I know where you're going with this question, so I'm happy to answer this. I last watched the Neverending Story, I want to say a couple years ago, and I'm sorry that I haven't watched it more frequently. Like, I cannot express enough that I do not like this film, and I think it is hot garbage. And I will continually repeat that. Like, I cheer when the horse dies. I envy the horse.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
that's the quote that's going for if we have to make quotes of me and Spiff doesn't eat hard meat, yours is I cheer when the horse dies.
Yeah, that's sociopathic, man. Like that's
It's not a real horse, Donnie. It's not a real horse. It's a character in a story, and somebody's reading my story and going, I agree with Arthur.
See, I want to circle back to the horse because I have a larger point to make about the horse that's different than what I think, but keep going with your bad take.
Well, no, I think the story. I'll say this: I wonder if I watch this movie with my grandkids in 20 years, if I'm going to see it in a completely different light than I do now. I wonder if I would have watched this post adoption, if I would have seen it possibly different. And I don't think my beloved daughter is going to be able to handle this. Like, I don't, but we're going to try it because I like to torture her with 80s movies. So it's fine. But that's my thought on it. The story does shift, and perhaps stories have to be received where we are.
I'm going to agree with you on a couple of things that have come up. And I think in terms of a plot and in terms of a narrative, it's garbage, right? It doesn't make any sense. It falls apart on itself. It doesn't. But in terms of like a series of kind of broken vignettes or something, I don't know, broken scenes, I think it's really beautiful. And I think it has beautiful moments. But as a story, it doesn't hold together. I'm going to agree with you. Like, and I have a larger reading of it, but the solution is really troubling. If there is a solution or resolution, is really troubling to me. And what I do think the movie does well. So I'm going to agree with you that the plot is not very good. The story is not very good. The narrative is not very good. In terms of visual, though, elements, in terms of some interesting themes going on, I actually think it was really ahead of its time. And I'll make a case for why when it's appropriate. But yeah. So yeah.
Well, and then, I watched, I think where I was going with this is, like, what does it tell us about the context of the things that we take in? There are spaces in which I will read, let's say, biblical narratives or, talk about church and, experience things that happen very early on in my, faith formation that I think about now that are like super cringe. And I'm like, oh God. And I wonder if I will then, in 20 years shift back or whatever. And I was just thinking about that as I was watching it, because I did used to love this movie. I love, like, now granted I was young and I was like, flying dragon dog thing, cool. Like, I'm in. But watching it now, I'm like, what on earth is happening? Not the dragon dog thing, like not Falkor, still on board with Falkor. It's the rest of it.
Let me ask you a question about Falkor. What do you think his scales felt like? What do you think the texture of those weird pink fleshy scales was like? Because
I don't like it. I don't have that fear. What is that phobia when it's like little circles that you
yeah.
Now granted, in the 80s, pixelation was not what it is now. And so I'm watching it on a 4K monitor and 60, it's like 75 inches of 4K Falkor. And I was like, it's a weird way to describe that. And I was like, I hate I hate his pearly scales, like, because they're not iridescent, they're like blobs that I'm like,
they're like fleshy.
Yeah, I don't like it.
They're like, I feel like if you squeeze them too hard, they would pop. I really do, and that's off-putting because I don't know what sort of Falkor juice would come from them.
So okay, I'm reining this back in. I'm gonna redirect the flow of bile out of the popped scales of Falkor. I think the question becomes, let's say, how do we revisit stories that we think we know, or we want to, or we have to know? And I think it's the meta narrative, not only of like Spiff and I have joked about how we're going to start, or I don't know if Spiff has agreed to this conspiracy. I want to break into churches and paint little naked, dead, drowned bodies in the Noah's Ark murals, because the Noah's story is terrifying. And we're like, but look at the 2 inevitably gay lions we painted, and it's not okay. But how do we come to grips with it? How do we find how do we revisit and rework and readdress and rediscern what stories are good or not good? Like, I gave up on the Abraham and Isaac story 15 years ago, and I refuse to read it. Like, I will not engage it. The Abraham almost sacrificing Isaac. I don't like it. I think it's an awful story.
Do you think that there's something to what you just gave, which was, I guess, permission to let it go? So much of like the Bible is like, here's the Bible from God, use it all, love it all. But if you know what I mean? And like, and if you think of like the movies in the same way, here's a complete film, use it all, love it all, you know, like in a different space, like, is it okay to just let that go? Is that what you need? I don't know. Donnie, what do you think?
Well, as a strong adherent to the Baptist Faith and Message 2004 and an inerrantist, no, I'm kidding. No, I think that's actually a really important part of. You used a really big question that has nothing to do with Neverending Story, but I think it's a really important part of. Look, I do come from a background that is somewhat Pentecostal, and I've kind of moved past it in many ways. But one of the things that I've retained in a very serious way is that the Holy Spirit, whatever that might mean, is still very active. It is not something of the, and part of that activity is allowing us to continually and constantly, and yes, this is very like kind of, you know, sort of in the bed of process theology, but to continually reaffirm and move aside from certain biblical narratives and stories. I think that that's an important part, and reframe those, right? Like I kind of disagree with Arthur that the Abraham and Isaac story should not be read, only because I think we can read it from different angles. Like, where the hell was his mom? And what do you think she thought about all of this? And I think that's part of sort of the role of some of those. Or like, you know, in 2 Kings, 2:30, when the bears kill children, which is my favorite story. I think those stories are important because they dislodge us from our assumptions about what the biblical narrative is, does, and should be. And maybe that's their point, is to make us go like, oh, it's not all about like hugging people and getting to heaven. Like there are stories about bears eating children alive, and we need to contend with that in some really serious way. Yeah.
Do we need to, and I mean, this kind of comes up a lot, but I feel like there is some kind of truth to this, is why we keep asking it. But like, so the ridiculousness of this movie.
Yeah.
Do we need to, I feel like I'm stepping. Am I okay on your end?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Do we need to lean into the ridiculousness of storytelling in the Bible? Because I'm with you on like the the mom bear mobbing the kids, and like there's the line in Acts that's like, he can't be drunk before 9:15. It's like, oh, you never met me in college. You know what I mean? Things like that. And so like, what does it mean to live into the that performative yet silly and exaggerated narratives that come within our biblical texts, and put them in play as part of the performance of worship? Like, what would our congregations gain from saying, look at how ridiculous this is, and yet what does it teach us, right? 2 and 1 kind of does the same thing. It's like, we'll take anything and we'll talk the theology out of it, you know, or into it and whatever. And I think it's fun, and it's why we have people that listen, and it's why we do, you know, it's why we have a book coming out October 25th. That, you know, we got 12 chapters of 12 different things that people may not say, that is God at work, and yet that is God at work.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, okay, so are we exegeting or are we eisegeting the Neverending Story? That is,
I still don't know the difference. Like
I
there
was
is
gonna
no
say, you want to,
difference.
for our deuces at home who are, listening, who are maybe not as well versed in the difference between ex and iso, do you want to explain the question?
I don't actually know if I know the difference between exegesis and isogesis, which is dangerous for somebody getting a doctor of ministry and preaching. But exegesis, I believe, is withdrawing the meaning from the text, while eisegesis is putting meaning into the text.
Yeah, but what's the difference? I mean, I like I don't know. I mean, I just kind of I'm not saying what's the difference in like a definition sort of way, but in a very functional sort of way. Like, how do I know I'm doing exegesis and not eisegesis? Who gets to tell me? Did I turn in the proper forms to ensure that I was doing exegesis right? I don't know. I think it's,
okay,
it's sort
but
of...
and perhaps there's the question that comes from asking the silly question is this: what does it mean to interpret together?
Yeah.
And therefore, like, I think something that gets me about Artreyu, if it's something that gets me about Bobaton or whatever name, boy in the real world, who needs a therapist.
Bastian? His name is Bastian.
All the names in this movie are bonkers.
Yes, they really are. But Moonchild, but Bastian and Artreyu, they do this as individuals. They're autodidacts in that regard, right? They don't, like literally Atreyu has to figure out everything by himself, and he keeps losing. And say what you will about the dragon, without a communal element, there's not even really a hero, because heroes have to participate in community. Heroes have to stand out of community. Have we fallen into the trap of the bigger C church or of Western Christianity of taking toxic individuality to the idea of we can now strike out alone? Or are we seeing the church paying for the ramifications of individualism?
Well,
are we bunch of
the film kind of
watching our horses drown?
I think in some ways the film like tells us that the individualism is impossible, right? Like that there's an impossibility there, that because even in his like isolated reading, and it's like, think about this too in terms of like, I don't know, kind of critical spatial realities here. If he like ascends to an attic alone under a blanket to read, and yet is still from that position pulled into community, right? She needs a new name. The interaction becomes, or the barrier of isolation breaks down. And so I think there's a kind of myth of isolation there, that we can't be individuals, that is as much as, and like think about the 80s and what's going on too in that context of like moving into this hyper individualism. I think the movie kind of shows us the impossibility of that in some ways. But I don't know, man. Maybe I'm again, that's not exegeting the movie, right? Maybe I'm reading into it.
I like that. I like what you have to say about it. I truly do. And I appreciate it.
I think you're right on. I think I appreciated like the concept of the never ending story. And I was very much like, okay, I get why this is a real easy movie to say, like, there is deep theology here. And like, in the same way, it's like that second death theory where it's like, your first death is your physical body. Second death is the last time someone says your name. And like that, this never ending story is the participation in hearing the stories and sharing the stories of others. And that, your participation as the reader is an active one within the context of the story being told. And I think that that's really important as we think about what we do exegete and even eisegete. I think the difference there for me is like it's why I like the lectionary, because I feel like I can exegete if I'll eisegete if I'm the one that's picking the text that says this happened and I need to talk about this and I'm going to use this text. For me, that's the difference. Or at least in how I process the difference. I don't know if it's the actual difference. But I think that there's something there with Bastian in being part and called into both the exegetical process of what is happening and like rooting for these characters, which we are called to do often in the vignette narratives of the Bible, and to read yourself into it, which he both does and then doesn't believe. And I want to get to that point of the like, he does not believe that he is part of this story. And what does it take for the church to believe that they are part of the story?
So it's a I've discovered
Hmm.
a challenge in the gospel according to Mark, because I've kind of come to realize I'm preparing to preach the gospel of Mark over the next year. Have it lined out and broken up and ready to go. And something I want to say every time before the scripture is read is, you are not Jesus in this story. You are Jesus in this world, because when you eat the bread and you drink the wine, you are actually a container of Christ. You are the second coming, or the next coming of Christ, or the final coming of Christ. Because I love freaking people out with incarnational theology. But in this story, you're not the one who would be like, dude, don't throw rocks at this lady. You would be the one holding a rock, ready to throw a rock at the adulteress, right?
And I'd be the lady.
Or the lady herself. I'm fine.
Not that I'm the adulteress. I'm just saying, like, the women
Right.
are always the women.
Right. And so I think I don't know if the church succeeds in seeing themselves in the stories that happen and understand that it's the same story that happens over and over again.
That's my point.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
High five. Donnie, what do you think, though? How do people see themselves in the story in the way in which I believe if you believe like that they should be like engaged in it, outside of I am Jesus, because I think that's where people want to go.
Well, I think it's interesting because I'm to answer a question you asked earlier. I haven't seen this movie in months, right? But I watched it so many times as a kid, and certain things stuck out to me. And so I'm going to go on memory that I might get it wrong. And I don't know, some listener someday is probably going to email me like, you doesn't understand the story. That's fine, I don't. But the moment you kind of talked about this idea of faith and belief, and he doesn't quite believe, and I like the scene, right? I mean, it's cheesy because there's like a storm and he throws up in the window, but that moment of belief and him crossing over into belief when he gives the new name is also directly tied, if you remember, to the loss of his mother and the death of his mother. And I do think that where we find ourselves in the stories, right, is oftentimes not in a moment of fulfillment, but in a moment of loss, right? That we often only find ourselves, I mean, this is kind of the classic trope, right? If you only find your religious identity, whatever that might mean, in the moment of loss, or in the moment of tragedy, or in the moment of suffering. So I think in some way, or not only, but a lot of people do, right? Like there's a kind of cliche there. And so I think that kind of gets brought up in the movie, that it's his belief is also attached to his loss, right? And overcoming that loss. And I think that it's kind of a sideways answer to what you're bringing up, but it's just something I keep thinking about, is how those two things belong to each other in some really serious way.
I think the movie is about loss. Like,
yeah, yes.
I mean, like, and I think, and it's couched, which is such a weird thing, right? It's why. So last week we were on Footloose, and we were like, is this a movie about a pastor's inability to like understand?
It's right. I'm sorry. I was responding to Donnie laughing. I wasn't trying to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, you're good. But like, and it's those things that we like, now that when you take that breath and step back, it's like, what is actually happening here? This is a story in which we expect a elementary school child. I don't know how old Bastian is, but like, he's young.
Like 11, 12?
I was thinking younger than that, but maybe. I mean, like, doesn't matter, right? So let's call him one of our Cairo kids, right? Like, he's just he's a young kid. Yeah. And we are expecting him to not only save the world, as, we often expect children to do, yet we never give them power or authority to do it. But also, like, to just navigate loss without any sort of support. Every person he meets is waiting for the nothing to come and take them. That the moment in which, I don't know his name, but like the big rock guy, where he's like, these hands are strong, these hands are meaningful and are meant to hold things, and yet I could not hold my people. And he's just weeping, and he's meant to be this big strong rock character. Like, we have those members, we have those people in our lives that are big, strong, and kind of with aging, as we see maybe even our parents start to, like lose some of that strength that we had put into them. Like rocks are meant, this is a rock that eats rocks. It's the first thing he does is he eats this rock. He's meant to be strength, and yet he cannot overcome the nothingness, whatever that's like that's coming for him. And it's a continual loss for this poor child until at the end, he's supposed to just know what to do. One of the liberating things that I took from this, and I'm curious what y'all thought, is that so it's a story of loss and loss and loss, and yet we end in resurrection. We end in like you get to come again, but only after the Empress tells him what he is to do. Like we expect a lot of Bastian to know what is coming, and then she's like, "You know it, just do it, Bastian." And he's like, "What am I supposed to?" She's like, "Give me a new name." How on earth is he supposed to know that she's supposed to give her a new name after all of that stuff?
Well, and I think this is just the most German children's movie ever, as literally fighting nothing. The void that is inside all of us always, that is fed whether we choose to serve it or not. I'm sorry. That's all I have. No,
it's one of those things where I was very much like, why are we not more direct for the things we need for liberation?
Well, why aren't we more direct with kids? Like this is
kids.
This is the story, and like this is how you challenge the stuff that's not good in the Bible. Why don't we trust children with the actual stories? And because then they become adults who don't want to learn the actual stories. And that's how the story
or learn very like safe versions of them, right? To your Noah's Ark.
Well, to the point where it's not even the story. Like the story of Noah's Ark is not the animals going 2 by 2 onto the boat. That is a detail that does not hold up under scrutiny.
Yeah.
Because like food chain, right?
What?
Right, like it's a founding myth, but whatever.
Well, okay, so I am going to bring up what I think the film does really well, and in comment to this idea of loss and suffering. One of the things, and I agree with your points here, of what there's a kind of failure in the resolution, right? And I think you've brought up one of the failures.
Well, it's only halfway through the book that it's adapted on.
Sure.
Yes. There's also this. The movie does something really well, and I'm going to do a take on the drowning of the horse here that I think is really important.
The best
because we collectively have experienced, if you're an 80s kid, the trauma of the drowning of Atreyu in the swamp. Now,
Artax.
I'm sorry, you are right. Artax drowns. Atreyu survives this tragedy.
It's a shame.
It is, but and we all have this like collective kind of trauma from it. But what I think is interesting is the film takes very seriously animal suffering. And I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean, the horse drowns because the horse is suffering depression. And that's a really interesting take on and gives a lot of credit to the internal lives of animals in animal life. And there is a kind of, when I said it's ahead of its time, I think there is like an ecological reading of the film about the suffering of animals and the suffering of animal life. And look, we can imagine kind of in our current situation, the nothingness that is coming is ecological. The nothingness that is all ever present in our future, and it's heralded by animal life. Remember, Gmork, the wolf, is what announces it, right? It's announced by animal life. The loss of the horse is not because the horse can't walk through sorrow or through the swamp. It's because the horse is overcome by its own sorrow. Animal life is taken very seriously, the suffering of animal life. The problem is the resolution to the suffering of animals is itself anthropocentric, that humans end up saving the thing, right? That humans end up fixing it by giving it a new name and holding it, whatever. So it kind of fails in that resolution, and that we have a very serious take on animal suffering and ecological suffering, but the remedy for that is just more human agency. And I think that, if we're thinking about the 80s and kind of the rise and the first recognition of like, hey, we're headed for climate disaster, there might be a redemptive thing. Maybe Arthur likes the movie a tad bit more now because it might announce.
I think you're making a good case for it. You did bring up the other side in it. So there was something about 80s and 90s cinema, and I don't know when the line was, right? And I think I'm the youngest of the three of us, but we're all very close in age, and we all have similar experiences. So like the Animaniacs in the 1990s was subversive. Children's movies up to a certain point were subversive. And I don't know where the line is, but I'm going to say around 1998, they stopped being scary, or they stopped having a thriller element to it, or a suspenseful element. Like you watch The Goonies, there's a couple parts where it's like freaky, right? Or a horse drowns in the swamp, or
I'll stand by it. E.T.'s the scariest movie I've ever seen.
Right. E.T. is the scariest movie.
Bambi starts with the death of a parent, right? Like it begins.
Everything starts with every Disney movie starts with. I mean,
but we see it, right?
I think at some point that's the generational divide, and I would say that's where that's the Gen X millennial line. It's much later than we expect. Like I would say it's probably kids born 87. Where it's when children were no longer trusted with the capacity to grow through storytelling.
Ooh. Well, and that's, I think we get back to your point about why do we bite-size biblical tales, and we bite-size the wrong biblical tales. Well, like,
sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm just like telling these kids Noah saved everyone on a boat. And it's like, well, that just leads to like death and incest. Like that's not a good story. Like
death, drunkenness, and incest. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean,
it usually goes in that order.
Yeah, exactly. What does it look like when we tell the tales of Vashti leaving to children and say like, hey, this guy wanted her to do something with her body that was not okay with her, so she left. Like that's a way more empowering story for kids than everyone dies on a boat, which is not the real story we tell them.
Everyone dies not on a boat.
Or not, so no, yeah, well,
But it's just like with chicken nuggets, right? Like we don't
great segue. It's just like chicken nuggets.
Well, no, we don't serve chicken nuggets at my house. I make supper, and I make the same supper for my husband and I that I make for my nearly 12-year-old daughter. And she has the option that if she does not want to eat the dinner that I have made, she may make herself a peanut butter sandwich. Because that is enough to sustain a person through a night, and we try again the next day. I also don't make like onions covered in vinegar, like whatever. Like I don't make.
First of all, too soon for onion jokes, but also no, I'm kidding. But also you're an exceptional cook. Just for juices out there, you were an exceptional cook.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm flattered, but it's a thing of like I'm not going to make chicken nuggets for my daughter, who would eat them every single meal because they're familiar and they were great when she was 5, and it made sure that she got some protein at that point. I'm not going to make chicken nuggets because they're familiar and safe for me, even though they're super convenient and very easy, because we're past that. And we're afraid to say we're past that. And this is something new. And this is a new story. We put the grain of sand under glass, and we don't yell Moonchild or chase bullies on a carpet monster.
Also, I love the fact that like at the end, right? So Bastian gets to come back, and he is the one that resurrects. He's the one that says like how every wish he makes is the world of Fantasia, right? Fantasia is that what it's called?
Fantastica.
Fantastica. I don't know, whatever.
Maybe.
But the thing he's like, okay, restore everything. And Atreus on the like and all the things, and then he's like revenge, and he like comes in, and like we end on this part of the movie of this Cairo aged middle schooler riding a dragon, exacting revenge on his enemies.
It sounds a lot like Revelation, right? Like it really does. Like it sounds a lot like our own ending.
I mean, bad readings of Revelation, I think, would draw real easy parallels to what is happening here.
It's almost direct. Like there's dragons, there's revenge, and there's weird pustules on the back of the dragon that if squeezed would pop and leak Falkor juice. I think that's all in the Book of Revelation.
Wait. We got to come back to the revenge and vengeance thing, because I think that's a vitally important thing. Can it be resurrection if it's based in vengeance? And did they make this movie expecting a sequel? That is to say, is the story really never ending? And then it turned out that they had to get Jonathan Brandis like 5 years later to make the second part that nobody saw.
Oh.
which is what happened.
Right, I was going to look it up. Isn't there a Neverending Story
There's
too?
There's
sequels.
3, isn't there?
There's 2 sequels, and the part 2 covers the second half of the first book, but Jonathan Brandis plays Bastian Behemoth Bonanza or whatever. And then part 3 I didn't actually read the Wikipedia page about because I was depressed.
Were you depressed because R.I.P. Jonathan Brandis?
A little bit.
Yeah, me too. So that's also part of our 80s childhood.
So the moral quandary within it, though, it's a different feeling. Like maybe Hocus Pocus is the last like that's the millennial line movie, right? Because the guys that the bad guys, Ice, and what's the other one's name? Hey, Hollywood, I've never had an acting job before. They're left in cages to die. Like that's what the movie implies. Like they're just, we're going to see skeletons of Ernie and Buttface. This movie, though, it's not like subtle. It's not like the bullies like kind of get it coming to them, or like the school is like, by the way, we noticed Bastian has confidence now and you need to stop bothering him. He doesn't even like punch them in the face. He chases them on a dragon.
He does. And they end up in the dumpster that they put him in.
Yeah.
Right. But it's too much, isn't it? Is that what we're not saying? Like it's too much. It's too far. It
crossed the line from, and I think maybe this gets back to the question of why church doesn't buy into them being a part of the story, because it crossed the line from myth and, like fiction and, and fun into now he's riding a dragon through the streets of Chicago or wherever they are, you know what I mean? Like to get revenge on his peers. And that is not necessarily the way in which we understand when we read, like, let's say biblical texts, right? Like how we should be living out the story, right? He's living out the story, but just in a way that seems like a kid would, which I appreciated. It was like, this is very much like, I know all those Cairo kids that when you're like, okay, what's your first wish was great. You got everyone back to like where we're at. But your second wish is like, you want to ride that dragon. And your third wish is you want your enemies in the dumpster too. And I don't know that that's even a childlike response. I know plenty of adults that would do the same thing. But when all of a sudden he comes out of the sky and then back into the city, that was the line that I was like, are we supposed to see ourselves in the ability to bring myth into reality?
But you're right. I mean, he does, right? Like there's an interesting movement element of he moves into myth, right? In the scene when he names, but then brings myth back with him into quote unquote reality.
Sure.
That's interesting that barrier crossing, right? Is really, I had not considered that. And that's a really interesting set of I don't know, activities, right? Something. So much room for activities there. I don't know. That's really.
You like guacamole? Sorry. No, as I was thinking about that, you had to you throw a Step Brothers reference, you're gonna get a Step Brothers reference.
This was their for.
Yeah, but I was just, I was very, I was moved by the fact. I was also very much, and I think this goes to the heart of my question that I brought today was like, what keeps us from being a part of the story, right? And I think some of it is that it scares us because the first time Bastian understands that he is affecting the story when he is like, Atreyu, run, or whatever, and Atreyu like hears him when he's with the turtle.
Yeah.
He's like, can I do that? Did I do that? Mm-hmm. What is that? And I think that those aren't questions that we help people as faith leaders hold well, that, and it gets brought up at the end with the Empress saying, like, he does not realize the power that one person has, that one young boy has. Go, Arthur.
Is it worse when they recognize what power they have, though?
I think it is when it's older. I think if we empower young people to say, here is your power and here's how you can use it well, we create a better society of adults that are more, not cautious is the wrong word, but that are more just reflective and, what?
Conscientious?
Yeah, conscientious, like with their power. They're more, it's not power to hold, but it's power to share.
He doesn't I'm kind of going back to the roots. It's not like Falkor eats the bullies. It's not like Falkor kills the bullies.
We don't know that. The movie
well, they fly, they go into the trash can, they laugh, right, and then they fly off. And there is a sense of justice in that. And I don't mean this in
back around so he can eat.
Okay, I disagree that the reading is that Falkor gobbled up children like bears in Second Kings. But perhaps I'm wrong.
But he says he doesn't eat children. He's a dragon. He specifically says he does. There's a line in which he says he does not eat children.
Yes. So it is like his revenge is more. His revenge is very mild. Like I don't know. Like that's you gotta. His vengeance is not vengeance, right? His vengeance is like almost playful. They're laughing.
Yeah. It's a kid. It's what does it, I mean, like, what does, now I don't want to put it into like reconciliation terms, because also very white movie, very white space, but what does it look like when we allow children to navigate some of the ways in which we heal?
Right. And what does justice look like to a child? It's not in a sense making the bullies feel the same way. He was not there to threaten the bullies. He was not there because he could have said, here's a dragon, it's going to eat you. It was to make the bullies experience a sense of what he felt. And that was in the trash can and having to run and all of that. But there's laughter in it. And there's playfulness.
Bullies are laughing though.
But they're bullies.
You cannot turn this into anything but a violation of the golden rule.
Well, okay. True. But let's also remember, okay, Bastian is not an innocent child in this either, right? How does it start? Bastian steals the book. Bastian engages in theft to even start this out.
He's a bad child and he should be eaten by a dragon.
He's also in grief. What grace do we give to grief? I mean, like the very first thing we learn of him is that he's a child because he can't open the jar. So his dad comes and opens the jar. There's still dependency of like, it very much sets up, here's kid. And then he's like, I had a dream about mom. Mom's clearly dead. I mean, why dad doesn't check two side questions. One, why is there like an attic that is like an old home attic, like an attic that I would anticipate being in Arthur's home, like in a large school, that like this like very wooden, like A-framed and like a key that's like attic. Like
the movie doesn't make sense. The movie doesn't make sense.
And so there's that, and then like, why did no one check on this child in the like? He's clearly, it's well past school hours. Like, no, he bails out of a math test because he's like, I'm already late for math, and dad's already busted me for math. But then like misses every other class into the night in a storm, and no one's like, anyone seen this random child?
The movie doesn't make sense. Hey, I want to make sure that we're cognizant of our time, because while the story is never ending, our podcast is usually about an hour long. Donnie Featherston, thank you very much for coming on and
this was a blast
arguing with us about the Neverending Story. I'm pleased to say that you're not wrong about all of your opinions, and I say that as my friend and as a friend to you as well. We do have a final question on this show that I'm going to rely on the Moonchild to ask.
You must call me Moonchild from now on. Donnie, thank you. It was really nice meeting you, and this was very fun.
This is great.
What biblical narrative, book, verse, person, thing are you most reminded of in Neverending Story?
Well, I was kind of thinking, one thing, but now I'm thinking about bears mauling children and Falkor. No, I actually think of the story in Acts 10 when I guess it's Peter, right, is hanging out doing something on a roof or whatever, and God says, like, he lowers this like blanket, right, with all this animal life, and he's like, kill and eat, and Peter's like, no, I could never do that, and he's like, no, kill it and eat it, it's fine, it's cool. And Peter never clears up, does Peter kill and eat, what happens, and then the blanket goes back up into heaven with all the animals. I've always found that story kind of interesting because it reminds me of this, in that animal life plays an important role in theology, and we often make theology about humans only, but there is an element of the importance of animal life, and again, Neverending Story I think has the centrality of animal suffering here, and I used to use that as an argument when I was younger, and I might still use it for that that animals do go to heaven, and they do have souls. And I sort of jokingly would make that argument, but like, if they don't have souls, how did they get there? And so I think, and the Neverending Story is a movie in which I think animals most definitely have souls and are taken seriously. So there, that's my answer.
I love
Yeah.
that.
And I think I got the reference right. I think it's Acts 10.
It is. Well
Okay.
done. Wow.
Good.
Are you sure you can be a disciple's theologian? Hello to all of the people listening in the general office as I make the joke that made the Church of Christ split from the disciples. Anyways, what was that? Sad reference.
As your first vice moderator, I think it's fine.
Okay, good. So I'm going to go with this. The child empress is Hagar, because she insists upon, or wait, no, Atreyu is Hagar. The child empress is God. That is, she insists that she be named. And Hagar is the only person to name God directly as the God who sees.
Ooh, that's good, Arthur.
And I see it as a, so for those of you who are listening, Spiff just changed her Zoom name to God. Perhaps we need to work on differentiation. But yes, in that regard, Atreyu is Hagar, especially too because he's out in the wilderness fighting off the nothingness of death by himself and has to figure out a whole lot of things when he should have community and he should be kept in the fold. Maybe I don't like how Atreyu is treated in this movie.
I don't think you do, and that's okay. So I'm gonna go. This may be a stretch because I was gonna originally go with Peter and Atreyu, especially in the like walking on the mud where he's like he's okay, and then he starts to sink because of his own depth of sadness and inability to believe, and the horse and that whole thing. But I'm gonna go with, and I'm gonna I think talk this out because I've been thinking about it, but I'm not entirely sure how it's gonna go. Shell Mountain, which is this dormant turtle that you find out later, but it's like just a mountain that you see in the, it's just like a thing, but talks about itself in third person because it is its only, or like as in multiple forms, because it is its only companion. But it is content. It is not the nothingness that we are afraid of that has been named. Like we think a lot of nothingness and the nuns that have no faith in modern times as like the ones that we are afraid of. Whereas the stillness of nothingness in Shell Mountain reflects those that are unnamed in the stories of the Bible, but that have informed the entire world set and who we are to see ourselves. It is okay to be content and not a part of the larger narrative and story or a deeper person of faith or a person of faith at all, as long as your contentness is within and amongst you. And so Shell Mountain, as those that are unnamed and don't need to be saved, are not nothing, but exist in our storytellings as just kind of mere objects, but they're clearly so much more.
Wow. Okay, we went there with the Neverending Story. We took a grain of sand and actually made a world in which we rain fire down upon our enemies in the vengeance of this has been 2-on-1. Dr. Donnie Featherston, thank you very much for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedule to do so. We are sponsored by Jeff Wunrow Designs. You can go to Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNROW.com to look at stoles, liturgical textiles, albs, chasubles, copes, all sorts of marvelous things that say, hey, liturgy is the work of the people, and we're going to be fabulous doing it. We celebrate 16 years of making ordinary time extraordinary with Jeff Wunrow Designs.
And you can use your code 2-on-1-15 for 15% off your entire stole order.
Fantastic. Well, on behalf of the 2-on-1 Project, I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
And I'm Dr. Donnie Featherston.
Yeah, you are, and yeah, we are, and we'll see you next time, deuces.
Bye.
Deuces. Get more 2-on-1 at 2on1project.com.